captains that were on board of the Westmorland, because she was at the very beginning, and she did one of the very decisive steps of the identification.
Yeah. Yes, what you see in the screen are some of the lists that were made. What happened is that when the crates were transported from Malaga to Madrid, they made it in 2 different dispatches. And when they arrived at the academia, they opened the crates, and there were a lot of people working, and they were recording everything in the lists. So, and they arranged them by the name of the crate, the initials of the crates. So when we, as he explained, we were the group of students working at the archive, and we had all those lists there describing, you know, paintings, sculptures, wonderful, incredible things. One of the first challenges, one of the first questions was, what was the meaning of these initials? Because they could mean the name of the, they could refer to the port consignees, to the dealers, just simple marks at the harbor. But looking carefully through the initials and thinking about the document that Jose Maria just mentioned, that there was art objects for the brother of the King of England, George III. And when we looked at, we realized that there were 5 crates marked with initials HRHDG. We realized that they were for the Duke of Gloucester, for the Duke of Gloucester, and that gave us a very important key, because after that we realized that we have to look for owners, and that would mean travelers, British travelers in Italy in the dates, just the dates before the capture of the Westmorland. So what we did is that, so what we did was working with the wonderful dictionary of British and Irish travelers, published by the Paul Mellon Centre, and which Brian Allen very generously and in a very uncommon act of generosity, he gave us the document. I mean, he gave us the PDF of the book, so we could make searches very fast, because we needed to match the name of travelers and the date, and doing that with the dictionary would have been very difficult. So with this incredible tool, we could move very fast. And we were able to match the initials in the list. As you see there, Gajon is crate, and then we realized that the crate marked EOB was belonging to Lord Lewisham, George Lake, who has been in Italy in 1777, 1778, and he was sending back his crates to his father, who was the Earl of Dartmouth. And similar with Francis Bassett, whose crates were marked FB, and with crate EB, sent from this Camden Cannon to the Earl of Bessborough. And with the initials and the contents, we could match that what it was described on the list was a portrait of a young traveller. Inside the crate FB, we looked for working on the identification of the portrait, then we could match that it was a portrait of Francis Bassett, who was the owner of the crate. And that was basically the process in many cases. In the list, there were described many books, like 500 of books, and so we had to start to look for them by somewhere, and given that the Real Academia was the main receptor of the collection, from what the documents of the 18th century said, we started looking there. So we started pulling out books, described in the list, the titles, looking for them in the library, and when we were pulling them out, some of them, many of them, were marked with hand annotations and different things, but some of them were marked with the names of the owners. So in the one that you see up there, the Dizionario Italiano Latino Francese, there was signed up there P.A. Corson, and this was packed in the crate mark PC. And in the Dictionary of British Travellers, there was a traveller named Ben Ashton Corson, who had been in Italy in those years. We also, thanks to this research, we learned that there was also travellers that we were not aware that were in Italy. That was the case for John Henderson of Fordell, and it was when pulling out one of the books described in the crate IH, which in Spanish 18th century is JH. We discovered this ex libris belonging to Robert Henderson of Fordell, so we could figure out that it was his son who had been in Italy, and he was the owner of all the contents. And so on, we were able to identify Robert Otney, John Barber, Light Brownie, William Constable, and Alan Ramsay, or the famous collector Charles Townley. They all lost their belongings in the Westmorland. And another big problem we had with the books was trying to identify the books. First, because when the lists were made in Spain, what happened is that most of the books were written in English, Italian, French, and so the scribes, sometimes I figure out how did it happen, and I can imagine one person opening the crates and then somebody else writing them and then pulling out the books and saying whatever it reads in English, and then somebody else writing whatever in Spanish. So sometimes when we have, and this is something that we often forget about making research, and it's like documents, you need to know how to read them, and in some cases the titles of the books were very difficult to read. We were not sure about what was the title describing them. But once we managed to do it, we were pulling out books, and then many of them were marked P.I., P.Y. And then we realized, actually, you realize that in most of the documents, they refer to the capture as the English prize, the presa inglesa. And then we realized that the P.I. could only mean presa inglesa. And that gave us another very important tool to go on and identify all the libraries. And also in the books, there were, many of them were signed by different names from the owners, and they were the names of the tutors. And it was very interesting, and it revealed us, it's one of the good, very interesting things that the Westmorland approach liked, which is the role of the tutor. And the first thing that made us think, or rethink about his role, their role, was the fact that the books were signed by themselves, which meant that they were the actual owners of these libraries, or they owned much of these contents.